Someone left a comment on one of our videos that stopped me completely. They said, born in 1979, grateful for getting to experience the 80s as a child and the 90s as a teenager. Feels like I hit the sweet spot. Over 600 people liked that comment because every single one of them felt the exact same thing. If you were born between 1965 and 1985, you didn't just grow up. You grew up at the single best moment in modern history to be a child. And this is why. You were a child before the internet existed. That sentence alone separates your generation from every generation that came after you. Your childhood was analog, physical, real. You played outside because there was nothing inside worth staying for. You used your imagination because nobody handed you entertainment. You got bored, genuinely, deeply bored, and you solved it yourself every single time. No one was watching you through a screen. No one was documenting your every move. Your childhood belonged entirely to you and the people who were physically there. You knew every kid on your street by name. You knew which yards you could cut through and which ones you couldn't. You knew whose mom would give you a snack and whose dad would tell you to keep the noise down. That neighborhood was your entire universe, and you explored every inch of it. There were no play dates scheduled weeks in advance, no structured activities every afternoon. You walked out the front door in the morning and figured it out. And the things you figured out, the games, the friendships, the adventures, those became the memories you still carry today. That kind of childhood, free, unmonitored, unrecorded, will never exist again. You had it, completely, without even knowing it was rare. Your teenage years landed in the 1980s and early 1990s, which means you came of age during the greatest era of popular culture in modern history. The music was alive in a way it hasn't been since. Every genre produced something that mattered. Rock, pop, hip-hop, country, soul. Each one had artists who meant something, artists who people argued about, lined up for, and saved up to see live. You made mixtapes for the people you cared about. You recorded songs off the radio with your finger hovering over the pause button. You waited all week to hear your favorite song, and when it finally came on, it felt like it was playing just for you. The movies were made for you. The 1980s produced more beloved films per decade than any era before or since. Films that people still watch 40 years later and feel something real. The mall was yours. The arcade was yours. Friday night at Blockbuster was yours. Saturday morning cartoons. The radio countdown every Sunday. You didn't just consume that culture, you lived inside it, and it shaped you in ways that still show up in who you are today. Here is where the sweet spot becomes extraordinary. When the internet arrived, you were young enough to adapt. You were also old enough to remember the world without it. You weren't a child when the smartphone arrived. You were an adult. You had already formed who you were, your values, your relationships, your sense of self, without any of it being mediated by a screen. You learned to use the technology. You embraced it, but it did not raise you. It did not shape your childhood. It arrived after the most important parts of you were already formed. Born in 1978, analog childhood, digital adolescence. Best of both worlds. That comment got 20 likes because it is exactly right. Every generation before you missed the digital world entirely. Every generation after you never knew the world without it. You are the only generation that got both fully and had the age and wisdom to appreciate the difference. Because you grew up offline, you know how to be bored without panicking. You know how to be alone without reaching for a device. You know how to have a conversation without checking your phone. You know what it feels like to wait for something and have it mean more because you waited. These are not small things. These are the skills that define a life well lived. And your generation has them in a way that younger generations are only now starting to understand they are missing. Think about what that means. An entire generation growing up without knowing how to sit quietly with their own thoughts, without knowing how to navigate boredom, without knowing what it feels like to be genuinely present with another person for an entire evening. Those are losses that no technology can fix. You carry something that can't be downloaded, can't be streamed, can't be learned from a screen. You are the bridge. The last ones who remember the world before, and the first ones who learn to live fully in the world after. No generation before you had that. No generation after you will either. Someone else left a comment that I keep coming back to. They said, "I believe the 70s, 80s, and 90s were peak humanity. That special pocket in time. Born in 1979, grew up in the 80s, a teenager in the 90s. I wouldn't change it for anything in the world. Peak humanity. That's what you lived through. Not a perfect time. Not a time without problems or pain or things that needed to change. But a time when life moved at a pace that let you actually live it. When childhood was still childhood. When summer still felt endless. When Friday night still meant something. When Sunday still had a sound unlike any other day of the week. You had the childhood that no longer exists. The teenage years that defined an entire era of culture. And you adapted to the new world without losing who you were. That is the sweet spot. And you were born right in the middle of it. If you were born between 1965 and 1985, tell us in the comments what year you were born and the one thing you are most grateful you got to experience. I read every single one. Welcome back to the offline generation. Subscribe and never miss a memory.